I want you to look at the campaign plan as a roadmap that will take you from point A to point B, from filing deadline to victory on election day, your vote goal. Now, the thing that you have to understand is, again, as a campaign, as a journey, you want a roadmap that's going to take you along the way successfully and get you there in the most systematic, clear way possible. Campaigns are chaos. Regardless of what level of office you're running for, there are going to be things that are unforeseen, things that come at you from a different angle that you didn't expect. Whoever has a clear, systematic approach to running for office is going to have a better chance of winning if they stick to that plan. Now, there's 6 parts of a campaign plan that I want to talk about today. The first part is messaging and positioning. What is your message? What is the overall reason that you're actually running for office? And then how are you going to position yourself against your opponent? The other part that I want to talk about is budget and fundraising. How much is it going to cost to actually run a successful campaign, and how much money then are you going to have to raise, and what is your plan to raise that money? The other thing that I want to talk about is campaign timeline. As you think through a campaign calendar, of course you've got the hard deadlines of election day, filing deadline, voter registration deadlines. What are those deadlines you have to fit in? And then obviously think about forums and parades and fundraisers, weekly totals. So campaign timeline. You're going to have to think about administration and legal. Who's going to be in charge of compliance? Who's going to be in charge of making sure all the disclaimer language is on every piece of campaign literature? The other thing you're going to think about is campaign structure. Who's in charge? What's the chain of command? Who's in charge of day-to-day? Who's in charge of the volunteers, compliance? Who's in charge of the office? All of these various parts of a campaign structure and chain of command and communication channels. The other part that you're going to have to think about in a campaign plan is voter turnout. Voter registration, voter turnout, district research, and then what is your get out the vote plan to get as many people as possible to the polls to vote for you so that you can be successful in winning your race. Now, the first part that I want to talk about is messaging. Messaging. Why are you actually running for office? Strangely enough, I will actually encounter candidates who really don't know why they're running. They'll get to maybe 1 or 2 points, and then that's it. I want you to sit down, if you're a first-time candidate, with a piece of paper for 45 minutes or an hour and write down 3 reasons that you're actually running for office. What are the problems in my community? What are my solutions? And then think through, are these solutions compelling enough to the constituents that they will in turn vote for me? The most important thing that you have to think about as a campaign message is understanding it will be the theme of your campaign. Anything from what your yard signs look like, to your campaign literature, to your door hangers, to your 30-second little door-to-door stump speech, to your 5-minute stump speech, to your 15 minutes at a civic club. Think about what the message is going to be. The other thing is you think about the message is positioning. How do you want to position yourself against your opponent? Are you the fiscally responsible conservative candidate against the fiscally irresponsible candidate? How are you positioning yourself, and understanding how you position yourself, how the opponent's going to position himself or herself? You've got to think through those things. Now, the other part of a campaign plan is, of course, the campaign budget. How much money is it going to cost you to be successful in running and winning? Campaign budget, how do you find that figure? I would suggest looking at the last 3 or 4 like elections and figuring out how much it costs to run a successful and contested election. Now, if the seat's not been contested for a while, of course, not a lot of money's been spent. So look for a contested election of a race that you're running for and figure out how much it costs. You can also talk to people in your area who have perhaps run for that similar office and figure out how much money it costs them to run a successful campaign. As you have a campaign budget in place, thinking it through, who are you going to have to pay? Do you have the ability to pay any staff, a campaign manager, your treasurer? Think through that. Are you going to have an office? Think about overhead, phones, internet, campaign yard signs, all your campaign literature, the door hangers, all these things. Think through how much it's going to cost. As you have the campaign budget in place, you've got to come up with a fundraising plan to actually get all the money necessary to fund the budget. Where are you going to start fundraising? One of the easiest places to start is with friends and family. I strongly suggest to people they start talking with friends and families as they have decided to run for office. Here's the thing, if your friends and families are not going to give you money, you might want to think about not running for office. Because if they're not going to give to you, it's going to be a little bit harder for you to to persuade people to give to you in your run for office. So start with friends and family, and then go look for the usual political suspects. Who are the people that typically give in your area to political candidates? And start that ripple effect as close to home as possible and just start rippling out. Are you going to do direct mail? Are you going to have fundraisers? Are you going to have small events, big events? Start thinking through the fundraising plan, have a systematic approach with a goal in mind that actually will fund the campaign budget. Now, after you've gotten through the campaign budget, you've got to think about campaign timeline. One of the things I suggest is getting one of those laminated yearly planners, get a dry eraser, start by circling election day. After you've circled election day, move backwards and start filling in the hard deadlines. When does voter registration end? Is it 15 days out from election day? Is it 30 days out? Is it same day registration in your state? Put those hard deadlines in place. The thing also as you move back is, when does early voting start? Is it 15 days? Is it 30 days? Do you even have early voting in your state? Write in the hard deadlines, include compliance issues, include everything that you have to have that's a hard date. Starting then going all the way back to filing deadline, and then from filing deadline, move forward. Put in parades, put in forums, put in everything, whether it's fundraisers, all those things as you fill them in. I would also strongly suggest, as you move forward, putting in weekly goals for doors to touch, phone calls to be made as you're doing voter outreach. Now, after you've moved through campaign timeline, think about the technical side of your campaign. Who's going to be in charge of administration? Who's going to be the treasurer? Who's going to make sure all the compliance issues are taken care of for your campaign? As the candidate, you need to be aware of when these filing deadlines are, the disclaimer language, all the legal aspects, but somebody else should be in charge of making sure those compliance needs are met. So who's going to be in charge of compliance? The administration, legal side, understanding if you're running state and local, you can take money from certain sources that if you're running for federal office, you can't. Understanding the max contribution levels at state and local if you're running there, understanding what they are at the federal level, understanding all of these things. Now, as we've moved from administration and legal, think about, again, campaign structure. You hire your campaign manager. Who is that person? Do you know and trust them? Is there a really strong trust relationship with them? Do they know what they're doing? After you've hired a campaign manager, of course, I say the next most important position is the treasurer, the compliance officer. Who's going to make sure that you stay out of trouble legally as a campaign? Underneath those positions, who are the field staff? Who's the volunteer coordinator? Who's the office administrator? Knowing who's in charge of what, knowing the chain of command, also having clear communication channels. One of the things that can sink a campaign is having dissension in the ranks when nobody knows what everybody else is doing, nobody knows what's going on, there's confusion and chaos. Chain of command, clear communication channels. The other thing I would strongly suggest, and I see this trip up first-time candidates especially, but even those that have been running for a while, is micromanaging a campaign. Look at your campaign structure as a pyramid. At the very top is not you as the candidate, it's the campaign manager. Off to the side is, of course, you, the candidate, who is, of course, in charge of the overall campaign. But day-to-day operations, making sure the trains run on time, obviously has to be the campaign manager so that you have more time to be raising money and reaching out to voters. Now, as you've moved through campaign structure, you want to think about your vote goals, district research, and turnout. What are your vote goals? What is the ultimate destination? Of course, is the vote goal, because you want to make sure you have or aim for 52% of the vote so you can be successful in winning. Doing your district research. What are the demographics of your district? What are the voter trends? What are the voter registration levels at the time that you'll be running? And then what is your turnout plan? Again, I look at get out the vote, which typically takes place in the last 3 to 4 days, but you should start thinking about it from 30 days out. What does your get out the vote plan look like? Do you have the list in place? Do you have a targeted door-to-door list? Do you have a targeted phone call list? Do you have the walking maps in place? Putting all of those pieces in place, because guess what? If it's a close campaign and you're within 2 or 3 points, that get out the vote plan will be vital to you being successful in actually winning your campaign. Now, as you've put together all of these pieces of your campaign plan, you write up your plan. This is your roadmap to success, taking you from point A, the starting point, the filing deadline, all the way to the ultimate destination, which is the vote goal, which will lead to victory. As you have your roadmap, as you put it in place, the most important thing that you have to do is stick to the plan. Campaigns are chaos. It will become chaotic, but if you can stick to your plan as closely as possible, odds are you're going to give yourself a better chance of being successful and being victorious.